Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to House of Footy. It's your boy Ray, and with me, I've got a full house tonight. Welcome, Mac
Good evening.
and Gio.
What is good, guys?
Happy New Year's to you all. No better way to start the year than to talk about some footy, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We have a great selection of matches from match week 20 to discuss, and so we'll definitely get to that. Before we do get into it, don't forget to follow us on our social media, both on X and Instagram. Our handle is at House of underscore footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. Lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys and we want you guys getting involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. Let's start with the match that took place on the day of recording. Gio, Liverpool versus Newcastle. A high scoring second half in this game. But I think overall, a lot of action, a lot of goals that were oh, balls ending up in the back of the net, but goals essentially ruled off for different reasons. But overall, very entertaining match. Gio, what were your overall takes from this result?
Yeah, no, definitely. As a neutral, I thought it was a very entertaining game. I think both teams are really trying to go for it, and both teams understand that there's going to be space in behind. So the counterattack was definitely on for both sides. And then there were lulls in the game where we saw kind of rushed football where passers were getting cut off and they were just going 100 miles per hour. Which to watch is great for a neutral fan, but as us, we are more in tune with the game. You kind of want to see more technical football, but it didn't take away from the entertainment. I do think Liverpool was the more deserving team. I think they had 34 shots, 15 on target, which was insanity. Whether the shots were great or not, to be able to have the opportunity is quite good. And then for them to score four, obviously there are talking points in the game, but I think it was well deserved by Liverpool. I think they always felt confident when they had the ball, and kind of knew that even though they did concede, that they were inevitably going to get their chances.
Yeah, a game where Gio, you pretty much highlighted here. Stats heavily favored Liverpool in terms of possession, shots, and even in terms of expected goals. I think it was reported that they had an expected goal of 7 in this game, which I think might be the highest in a Premier League game since they started recording that stat. But back, there were chances for Newcastle, and especially brilliant pieces of play where they were able to beat the press from Liverpool and had some of the chances. What were your takes from I guess the Newcastle performance here?
It kind of felt like it's like a kid in a lot of cases when they're sort of a little bit too short to go on a roller coaster ride and they're hanging on for dear life and just praying it all works out. That's what kind of felt like in the Newcastle performance where they were hanging on, they were doing a couple of good things in key moments, but it seemed a little bit ragged, and they were very fortunate. I think great. There was a stat I was going to bring up. They had expected goals of 7.27, which is the highest XG total on record since the 2010-2011 season. So well deserved. This was all Liverpool. Newcastle just barely hanging on, but in those moments, you can see why they're such a key threat to a lot of different teams of how they can play on the counter, how clinical they are up front of the pitch. I really trust either Isak or Callum Wilson or even Anthony Gordon. Players like that on their day can kind of be showstoppers in the final third, as well as defensively. When you have a performance where Martin Dubravka is making 11 saves, it felt like he had more saves this game than Onana's had since the beginning of the season. I don't know. It was just me? Is too soon? Sorry, Gio. I apologize. But the point being, he had a phenomenal performance, and it's weirdly, I still feel like he deserves man of the match, and he conceded 4 goals because the way that he was playing, it's kind of the best experience you can really have as a goalkeeper, where you really feel busy. There's a lot of shots coming at you, and you feel like you can stop anything. Of course, except for the 4 goals that he did concede. But still, very positive performance. I feel like from his perspective, and defensively, what the back four is able to do on most teams, you can see why this Newcastle team is such a threat. But they are not in a great run of form themselves. They still are, and we've talked about it continuously, and I think we'll have to keep harping on it. They're similarly to this in-game performance. We're just hanging on by a thread until January because they need to be able to bring in enforcements, because you can see the rotations they have to make. You see the players that they have to be able to bring in, which I think, like, for example, we may talk about this. If you were going into the season and you're a Newcastle fan and you feel like you're relying on Miley and Livramento playing at Anfield, you probably weren't expecting that going into the season. So I think that, again, they finally got across the hurdle. They've survived just barely, I feel like, coming out, and are still within shout of a top 4 position. But they need to start getting things rolling soon and fast, because everyone else is going to have the chance to be able to retool. They just need to do it much quicker and much faster. So from this performance, there are some positives, but definitely Liverpool well deserved all 3 points and clear winners without a shadow of a doubt.
Okay. On that note as well, I noticed, of course, one of my fears as a Liverpool fan going into this game was how well Anthony Gordon was going to play and what Liverpool would do to sort of counter that. Very surprised that he started on the right-hand side, which actually made it easier, I would argue, for Liverpool to kind of contain him, because he wasn't using the space in behind Trent on the right-hand side. And it was Joe Linton instead, who's a very busybody, but he's not going to be that type that's, high and wide, and he's more so kind of just tucking into midfield to help with some of those midfield battles, which I think Newcastle did very well. As Jim pointed out as well, it was tied going into the first half, so great position to be in. But of course, in the second half, just the sheer number of chances that Liverpool had, eventually those goals came through. Gonna go back to it then. Very early in the first half, I think it was the penalty shout, and there was of course another penalty that was scored by Mohamed Salah, but one saved and one scored. Gio, give us your verdict on, were they penalties? Both chances. I think the one was Luis Diaz brought down, and then the second one was Diogo Jota. What do you think there, Gio?
Honestly, if you flip the coin and whichever side it landed on, I wouldn't have been all that mad on. But it's not that they got this. It's the sheer fact. How do I put this? It's the sheer fact that they are so often being considered and reviewed. I think I speak for all football fans to say that Liverpool, Man U's always the team that always seems to, get picked on and say, oh yeah, they always get bailed out with a penalty call, score 1-0, kind of win the game, steal the game there, but it played absolutely poor. But Liverpool never gets these questions. So to me, a flip of coin, if it gone either way, I wouldn't have been mad. But it's the sheer fact that they are even being considered. I think it's very very lopsided. Liverpool are getting a lot of these calls. Not to say that they are favorited to get these calls, but they are doing their job and doing their part to put themselves in this position. For teams to foul and for them to even get a chance like this. So honestly, I'm not mad at it. Am I shocked? No. Is it disappointing because the game was kind of exciting and it could have gone either way? Yes. For penalty calls to go that way, and then kind of sealing games is quite disappointing. But apart from that, yes, no. But there's going to be obviously Newcastle fans are going to be on the other side of the coin, and vice versa.
I'd like to agree on that, Matt.
So what I find interesting about that, going into this game, if you take a look about who's got kind of the rub of the green, and it's not really been Liverpool. If you look at a lot of these VAR decisions, and we'll go back to maybe the Tottenham decision and other areas of concerns with certain red cards, because they're tied in the league for the most red cards kind of received, and they've only attempted going into this game 4 penalties, where the leader in the Premier League so far this season is Chelsea at 7. So even with the 2, they're still not even at the top of the league. So for me, I think it's a little bit, I don't think that perspective, that fan reaction is just that, a fan reaction, and not really much logic or sense into having that feeling. In regards to the 2 individual penalties, here's what I think. In terms of the ones of Luis Diaz, he got knocked over, he fell down. Fair enough, he did get clipped. I think he did his job in falling down and kind of exaggerating contact. Exactly what you need to do. I think even if it wasn't called, I think VAR would look back and probably review that. And for me, it's not too dissimilar. And why, again, the complaint should come is, again, coming from an Arsenal fan's perspective, the similar contact on Havertz a couple weeks back, which wasn't called a penalty. It's similar to that. So I feel like whatever's the on-field decision, they're just going to stick by that and kind of run with it. And it seems like that was the case. The funny one is the Jota one. Because every situation, you're looking at that, oh, he's clearing a break. He beats the goalkeeper. There seems to be some contact. Okay, yellow card. And a lot of Liverpool fans may be screaming, why isn't that a red card? Looking back at the replay, it is one of the most egregious dives I've seen in history. It's a foul. 100% it's a foul. It should be a penalty. The referee made correct decision every which way. However, what should have been happened is that Jota should have also gotten a yellow, because that was such an egregious dive. Because he fully planted both his feet, and he's like, shit, the ball too far away now. Gotta fall. You know what I mean? Like that's again, everything was right. He just deserved a yellow for just like misconduct or shithousery or unfairness. Something of like blanket of, okay, yeah, we're gonna give you the pen. You deserve it, but you done fucked up. That's how I feel like it should have come out based off that decision. It's still correct, but he deserved punishment. Or he needs to be mocked more on Twitter. Or in like a Liverpool dressing room situation, I need to be seeing something of the Liverpool PR team coming out. It's like, hey, everyone's trying to do their impression in the next practice. I think that would be fun. There needs to be more of that because he deserves shame. Shame.
Of course, we won't really, I think, speak too much about that, and I think the media won't capture too much of that because the main point was Mohamed Salah did tuck away that second penalty. I think if I heard it correctly, now over 150 goals in the Premier League for Liverpool. But the big thing is, I on a side note, I did want to say I'm very impressed with his sort of ability now to play make as well. He has that final sort of last pass instead of just the cut in and shoot. But the big question is, of course, he's going to be missing. I'm quite certain for the AFCON, which starts I think in next weekend, all the way into early February, and that's going to be a huge miss for Liverpool, going into a period of where I think games have slowed down a little bit, but still, of course, Liverpool ending this match week first in the Premier League, it's going to be a concern, I think, if goals dry out, who's going to pick up the goals? Because, of course, we all know Darwin Núñez didn't score this game. He had some chances, and it's sort of a question there. But let's combine this chat then, moving on to our next game that we're going to discuss now, Mac, and that's, of course, Arsenal. They were in action against Fulham, and fortunately for them, on the receiving end of a 2-1 loss. What were your takes from this performance, especially after a loss against West Ham? I think it was midweek. What do you think?
This is in terms of. In some ways, it's interesting that it's happening earlier because in previous seasons under Mikel Arteta, this type of run would happen towards the later end of the season, where over the last 5 games, they've only picked up 4 points out of a total of a possible 15. So not a great run of form. Losing back-to-back to London rivals, not great. I think what's very interesting is where a lot of the issues that I guess were I had brought up, not to say that I was right, I'm definitely going to separate my own shoulder to pat myself on the back. It's the ability in the final third in terms of that striker, that position. When your rotation isn't Nketiah coming on to be able to play against Fulham, there is no depth there. And Jesus has fluffed chances as well himself. So overall, I feel like that's coming really back to kind of bite them in their ass in these games. I think in every game preceding the Fulham one, they were actually, I would argue, better than the opposition. They just didn't take their chances. This was the first time it really felt like where Arsenal were completely out of it. And they didn't have the creativity, didn't have the press, didn't have the quickness of pass to be able to create enough opportunities for their front players to latch onto. And even in the 1 and 2 off moments that they did, it was scuffed chances. And their players in the final third weren't that separator, weren't that difference maker. And right now, that big hole and whatever Arsenal fan is talking about is that striker position. I think that's what we really have to nail down, because when you take a look at their expected goals, the non-penalties expected goals, they rank on level. Actually, they're only 1 ahead of both Brentford and Everton, if you're not including penalties. So they're very, very reliant on thus far this season in terms of set pieces, penalties, and kind of getting the rub of the green in the final third from some of their better players. But when things don't break right, that's when that quality of a striker is able to take you to that next level. So for me, that's been what's struggling with Arsenal a lot, and why they haven't played so well. But this Fulham game, I think, is kind of a huge alarm bell where, hey, they've dropped down on the table. They're now at 40 points. They're tied along with Man City in the top 4. So it's not a disaster, but we need to start picking things up now. Otherwise, that separation for where Liverpool is right now, it's going to kind of gain further. And as we know from this Arsenal team, they historically haven't done well in the latter half of the season. So is this just they're taking it early, kind of having their rocky patch now before things start to pick up, or is this a worrying trend? That decision I feel like is going to be kind of made clear of which way it may go based off their business in the transfer window starting today, of course.
Oh, well, interesting because exactly sort of what I was thinking here, Gio. Arsenal, I don't think, of course, performed to their best, but I
Yeah.
think as well the goals that they conceded, Raul Jimenez, it's unfortunately for Mac, I guess he wouldn't have wanted him to score. But of course, I do rate him, and
He needs a
he did
goal.
score.
He needs a goal. He's not that good. He needs a goal. Help him out.
Yeah, well, he did score, and you could say yes, great way to score, and it was essentially a break. They won in midfield, went down on the other end, and then just great ball across. Raul Jimenez at the far end getting onto that, and then of course the second goal they conceded was a set piece, which in any other day kind of you deal with those, and so I feel like in a sense, I understand what Mikel Arteta has been doing with his squad, where he wants to be able to control games, where maybe they've lacked, I think, a little bit, and you can back me up on this, Mac, if you think, if you agree, they've given up a little bit more of that clinical edge at the final third, and instead are sort of using their defensive prowess and their ability to keep the ball in certain areas of the pitch, mainly on the opposition's end, to sort of control matches and then eventually win it just by being better at keeping the ball and finding those one or two chances. Whereas, of course, in games where you have sort of 50-50 chances, you concede a goal early, it could go the other way, and you kind of need that X factor. And so I guess the question for you, Gio, is do you sort of agree that Arsenal need to reinforce at this moment to sort of keep that title charge, or will it blow by, considering they have had a recent run of form that I think where they've dropped points, and of course we don't expect them to do too much of that later on in the season. What are your thoughts, Gio?
I mean, to Mac's point, yes, I think a striker would help greatly, tremendously, but I also do believe that you can't pin it all on the striker. I don't think as a team they have been all that clinical. Last two games, Martin Odegaard, Saka himself, the star boy, hasn't been all that clinical himself in front of goal. So, to that, I think it's a team thing. It it definitely is a team effort. Their cutback chances that they always create in the middle, they're just not putting those away. As for early on in the season, those are almost automatic goals. So I think as a collective, they need to be more clinical. Yes, can they strengthen? Absolutely. I think any team would love to strengthen, and if the option is there to strengthen the team, who is going to turn that down? Sorry. So with that being said, I think yes, it is a little bit of a blip. I think much like Man City, they are experiencing a little of a blip, but I think unlike Arsenal, I think Man City have almost that switch coming back, which is KDB, and again, I forget his name, but they are signing a youngster. I don't know if he's coming to the club immediately, but they are already looking for reinforcements, as they do know, certain players are going to look to leave, like Calvin Phillips. So they're already on the move there. So they're looking to strengthen and make that push, which they typically do late in the season. So if I'm Arsenal, I'm looking to do the same things and follow suit, just so even if you don't end up using them and you turn that form back on, it's great to always have.
Yeah, on that note, quickly, that player I think you're referring to will join them next January, so it's not going to be a exact reinforcement at this point. But I mean, City will do what City does and pick out a gem from somewhere, and then eventually in 3 years you'll see them start in the Premier League. But Mac, yeah, overall thoughts on sort of what would the results from this weekend mean for the title race, and how you see, maybe if you want to talk about a little bit about Arsenal and what the plan is moving forward.
I think just to go back to like the comparison to what you brought up, Ray, from last season and what they've done, I think the differentiator, I do agree, they have tried to, in essence, try to have more control and have control over the game and have dictate of the and really dictate the tempo of the play, and that's kind of their front decision. But I think the separator from the last season and what a lot of the attacks and why they felt like more of an kind of a threat was, if you look back at a lot of their games, they score goals within the first 15, 20 minutes. I think of the first 10 games, that they played last season. And about 6 of them, they scored a goal within the first 20 minutes. And what that immediately does is it puts the opposition under the cosh and has to come out to play them. Versus now, a lot of times going into the season, they haven't hit that spark early, which as the game drags on, the pressure then, even though it starts off on the other team, it kind of reverses back into them where they have to come in and be able to score. So I feel like that's been a separator as well. That early goal has really kind of helped them out a lot last year, where they don't have that today nowadays, as well as this is very much a similar game plan going as last season. So a lot of these managers have already played against Arteta a couple times and know the system that he wants to play. So he may be a little bit found out. So what is that next evolution? I think for Arsenal, does this impact their title odds? Absolutely, of course. 3-point dropped 6 points in a row. Not great. Are they out of it? No. They can go on a run themselves. They do have quality players. And we've seen from this team that on their day, they're one of the best in the world. But I think if they want to be a serious contender, and as we may talk about Liverpool, I think both of those teams, if they, right now, Man City are a little bit weakened, they are getting reinforcements. But to match pace with what we expect what Man City will do, they need to bring in, for me, Liverpool need 2 signings. I think Arsenal needs 1. Arsenal need to nail in that striker. If they want to win the Premier League, they need to be able to bring in an Ivan Toney, Oshman level type of striker that can come and score right away. Versus if we look at Liverpool, they need a left back and defensive midfielder in all likelihood. And maybe, I don't know if it's me, and especially watching this game from today, I know it's a side note going backwards. Whenever the commentator would say, oh, Endo has the ball, for me, maybe, again, like I said, PTSD, I kept hearing Hendo every single time.
Yes.
And then I just got scared. And I'm like, oh no, what's going on here? We need, where's Ray? Someone help Ray, you know? But again, I think both of those teams, they've done well enough this season to still be in the title show. But they need to reinforce now. Otherwise, kind of that demon chasing you and is going to kind of drag you down and overtake you is coming. So they need to do, both teams need to do something for sure.
Yeah, great shout. And of course, we mentioned the 3 out of the 4 clubs that are in the top 4 right now. Of course, Aston Villa is still up there. So even though we're not going to mention them too much in this podcast, it's interesting that it is a very, very open still title race. And it's exciting because it's, I think we can all agree, it's different than previous years where City just run away with it. So we'll definitely keep an eye out on that. We're going to take a quick break here, boys, and then we'll be back covering some more Premier League action from this weekend. So stay with us, guys. Welcome back to House of Footy, guys. We are going to continue our podcast now discussing another game that took place for match week 20, and that's Spurs 3, Bournemouth 1. A game, Mac, that saw a lot of chances, and I feel like when I look back at the chances, it feels like it was because Bournemouth had more chances, more overall shots compared to Spurs, even though they were away. It feels like it was Spurs against Spurs, but Spurs just had the better finishers, whereas Bournemouth are just not there yet. Of course, they've been, I think, one of the teams in the best forms. I think a couple of wins in the last games. So props to them, but unfortunately they weren't able to get it done, and Spurs continuing to impress us, picking up another win and very much knocking on the door for the top 4. What are your takes from this result?
I think this is, for me, if you ask the first part of the season, the first half of the season, who has been the best newcomer to the Premier League, has been, of course, Spurs goalkeeper Vicario. I think he's been phenomenal. I think he has already kind of erased their memories of what Hugo Lloris would do to their team on a regular basis with an absolute shambles of a mistake. Again, we always know one was coming with Vicario. You're not really expecting it. He seems like a quality goalkeeper. So love to see that. And on this individual day, Bournemouth had 24 shots in the match, the Cherries most that they've had in a Premier League since 2019, and actually 12 more than Spurs. So from what you're saying is really like Spurs, action Spurs. And I felt like Vicario, for me, was the difference maker, where a lot of the saves that he was able to make kept Bournemouth at bay and allowed, of course, Tottenham kind of do what they do. And their early goal, to which then Son and Richarlison scoring, kind of nailing up 3-0. So even the scoreline seems a little bit closer and the shots seem a little bit closer. It was really kind of a last gasp from Bournemouth. So I think overall, great performance. But the funny part is, and again, I always have to do this just because, you know, it is a bit of mine. For Richarlison, he had a couple like clear opportunities as well before he ended up scoring. So if he didn't score, kind of the egg would be on his face if this game was a little bit closer. Similarly for Spurs, just as kind of Bournemouth kind of scuffed their chances. So overall, fair result. Definitely in the final third, I think as we're talking about in the break, Son, the difference that he has for this team in the creative sense, in the quality in the final third, is going to be missed heavily over the course next of this month and a bit potentially. So it'll be interesting to see what Spurs go from here, because I think it's not just him. I think also Sar, Basuma, if I remember correctly. So they're going to be they as well. Will need to kind of adjust, especially maybe you need to bring in a couple of players in the January transfer window, because they want to keep pushing and pushing if possible to make that top 4 position. So overall, great game from Spurs. Lovely to see. But unfortunately for Bournemouth, they just got outgunned by a bigger gun.
Exactly. That's a great shout. A couple of players will be missing, and Gio, it very much looks like the game plan for Spurs has been, try to be solid defensively. We're going to concede chances, but with the high line, it makes it harder for other clubs to sort of build up from deep, and then eventually the space that they do have arriving in the final third will be kind of condensed as the ball's played over and the back line is retreating. Moving forward without Son, without Sar and Basuma, what do you think the Spurs game plan would be? Of course, as well, quick side note, Hugo Lloris, he did make a move to the MLS, so he'll be closer to us boys. He did join LAFC, but of course, James Madison still to come back. Are you looking for you expect some reinforcements from Spurs, or what do you think their game plan will be as they, of course, pushed for that top 4 position?
Especially with those guys out that you mentioned, it's going to be very hard to kind of sustain the style that they do play. Even through periods of the game where Bournemouth was attacking, they were dribbling through their guys quite easily and creating chances. Again, against another team, those chances that were laid off, dribbled up through the middle, and then laid off, could have been easily put away by any other team. If you play a Brighton, if you play a West Ham, if you play a Villa, those types of chances will go in. It's not that they are looking phenomenal defensively. Yes, they play a more defensive way in order to create their counterattack chances, but they haven't looked great either. So if they lose those guys as you listed, I think Postecoglou really has to look and see what he has to tweak in order to allow the loss of players to be a little bit more sustainable for the team, but for them to be able to contain the ball a little more, or simply just be more disciplined defensively, not just dropping back all the time. Really go out there and try to win the ball.
I think that's right on point, because like we see in this game, there's chances where Spurs start, or at least the seasons have tended to start quite well, maybe taking a page out of the Arsenal book from last year, but there are periods in the games where they concede a lot of chances and they aren't able to sort of get a foothold on games, where, of course, if you have aspirations to be those top clubs in the Premier League, you really need to be able to kill games and see out games through just control. And so in terms of their chances for the top 4, it might be a little early, Mac, but with them sort of missing key players for the next, I would say, 4 weeks, do you see them perhaps dropping off some points here? What are your expectations for Spurs?
I think it depends. Again, it depends on the recruitment. For me, I feel like the first 2 key positions they need to be able to bring in right away is another center half as well as a defensive midfielder, just to be able to plug those holes in the meantime. Again, Romero's due for a red card every other game, and you need more kind of backup there, other than Davies, who's been great. And Van de Ven, I think, has been injured for quite some time, so who initially looked like a really quality player coming in. So having a little bit more kind of depth there. And in midfield, a player that I'm calling for them to be able to pick up, and I think would be fascinating coming off City, Calvin Phillips. I think that's been the biggest rumor going for him. If you go into that Tottenham team, I think that if he goes over there with those departures, he probably walks right into a starting position. Might be tough for him to go from playing no games for 3 years to playing every minute of every game for the next month and a bit. But I'll call that type of signing. They need that type of player in their midfield just to close their gap. So if they do the right recruitment, I don't necessarily feel like them dropping off. And given the fact that on their day, they're able to create an abundance of opportunities against every team in the Premier League. It's really, and I think what you had highlighted, Ray, is about that control. And you can see them trying a little bit this game is where, okay, it really how control works for teams. And I don't mean to put it as a dichotomy where there's only these two options, but other teams, okay, we're going to retain the ball, we're going to cycle it, we're going to keep control by having the ball. Or they're going to keep a solid foundation and understand, okay, the other opposition has the ball. We're able to block them off these key areas, kind of like at Jose Mourinho-esque, where as long as we deny these key areas and allow them to have the ball in comfortable positions, we'll be solid, we'll be okay. And it seems like they've been fighting back and forth as after they come out of the game, kind of out of the gun initially from the starting off the race for the first 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes of the game with guns a-blazing, scoring a couple goals, all looks great. It seems like, okay, so now what do? We don't know which of those options to be able to do. We're not good at necessarily either of them right now. Then they kind of lack that phase. So whichever way they go will be very interesting. And I think that's the next evolution of what Postecoglou will do. But at least in the interim right now, they need reinforcements to keep up this pace. And over time, when players come back, when they're able to bring in more players, which I think they should have a heavier checkbook going in, considering they're only in the two competitions now. I think the FA Cup as well as the Premier League. They should try to invest in this team if they want to get back to the heights where they were for the previous couple of years. So again, I don't think that they're going to necessarily drop off if they sign the correct players.
That's exactly right. Spurs, of course, throughout the season, sorry, they've only really been in one competition. I think they can't remember who they lost to in the. They did lose to Fulham in penalties in the EFL Cup, but apart from that, they do have a FA Cup third round matchup against Burnley coming up, and then a quick turnaround against Man U at Old Trafford, which we'll preview because honestly, at this point, we can't really tell what team we're going to get, who's going to be playing for either respective team. So, going to be, I think, an interesting and testing period. But if they can make it out of this sort of next 3-4 games in the Premier League with a decent results, then very much liking their chances to make a push for that top four. But of course, we have to talk about this last game, and that's of course Nottingham Forest 2, Manchester United 1. Gio, I of course we haven't spoken too much since, but I can definitely sense your frustration through the camera. Man U, of course, off the back of that amazing comeback against Aston Villa, followed up with this poor result at Nottingham Forest. What were your overall takes in this game, Gio?
Why are they so bad? Why are they so bad? It's like I get it. You had a very fortunate week against Villa, coming back 3-2. Hodgson scoring his first, fantastic. Man U being, one of the greatest teams, in terms of coming back. But stats like that they irk me a little because it's the fact that you're down, you're so consistently down for you to make those comebacks. How about we just scratch that sort of connotation that Man U's a great comeback team and just focus on how about you don't concede and don't be down. How about that? Let's play good football and just constantly be in the game, not having to fight back. Down 2 goals, bring it back 2-0 and only getting 1 point. Why don't we win 2-0 and get all 3 points? So it's getting to that point. We're getting to that point where people are a little bit delusional and understand, okay, yeah, that was a great comeback win, but look how you come out this week. Flatter than ever, thinking, okay, we score one, the comeback's on. And then fail horribly to defend. And again, Nottingham Forest had chances throughout the game. We're always in it. Always looked like they had a chance, to create an opportunity. So, with that being said, Man U I wholeheartedly believe that Man U deserved the loss, and that time is ticking for ETH, whether we like it or not. I think, like I've heard throughout the games, is that a lot of the announcers are correct. He's had a lot of time to work with it, but why hasn't a plan been figured out? Even with a lower caliber side, there are ways to win, and there are ways to manage a team, to get wins like off certain teams, to get points, but they are struggling and struggling severely week in week out, and I think you know change is looming. I'd say.
Ooh, very, very strong words from Gio there, of course. A very, if I was a little Man U fan, very frustrating result. Nonetheless, Nottingham Forest, a team that haven't been performing that well this season, but of course, with Anthony Langa, a former Man U player, coming back and facing his former team. It's just something about those players that will be facing the former teams, and there's just that extra level of play that they get to that sort of just pushes them over the edge. So great credit to him. How did you see this game play out, Mac? The Nottingham Forest win over Man United.
It's rough because again, I do enjoy bagging on Manchester United as you may know, but it's kind of feels a little lackluster and hopeless at some points because my favorite moment in this match wasn't even a moment of the game itself. If there was a cutaway at one point, I think it was after the halftime interval where the Nottingham Forest players are gathered together and Morgan Gibbs White is like, "Hey, look at their faces. They don't want to be here. You know, they're scared." And immediately cuts away to Ericsson, who looks like he again exactly that. He looks like his soul has left his body. He's like, I'm just here to be able to kick around the ball around for fun. There isn't that competitive drive, it feels like, in a lot of these Manchester United players. Not to necessarily pin it on Ericsson, because he's a quality player. He is kind of a little bit lethargic in his natural play, but you get that feeling where there isn't that quality, but there isn't that same type of drive or effort that you feel from this team in a lot of ways. And looking at the back this calendar year and kind of going back to what Gio said in terms of there may be change of foot, Manchester United have lost 21 games in all competitions in 2023. That's the fourth most in Manchester United's history in one calendar year. So this is the fourth worst year Manchester United has had, period, all under Ten Hag. Which again, they won a trophy. That's great, but overall, this is not a great result. And this is and against Nottingham Forest, a team that has not won consecutive games since last January, and this was, of course, their second win in a row. So it's not a great look overall. It got to the point where Ray Gio, one of our mutual friends who's a Manchester United fan, was talking about it afterwards. Says, "Hey, you know what? I really like Sergio Reguilon. He looks like a normal left back." And that's when you're saying words like that as a takeaway, a positive takeaway from a game. The levels of down bad is just that they cannot be surpassed unless you're a Chelsea fan, of course. Which I guess that's nice in some ways. That's the one positive for Manchester United is that Chelsea are worse, right? There is someone worse than you. But I don't know. I am struggling. I'm honestly sitting here struggling, trying to find out positives or take away positives. Because as soon as they give you that little glimpse of like in the last result to come back to win, you seem spirits are high, hoorah! They just take it all away, you know. So it's they're what can we really take away from this team? I don't know. I think these reports, short term, at least to give some credence, is that the most recent reports have, in terms of updated NES, are going to kind of give a budget of like 215 million for the January transfer window to Manchester United. So it seems like they're ready to splash some cash. Interesting, it looks like they're going to allow Varane to walk. Those are the most recent updates and not resign him at all. So again, that was a piss poor signing from the jump. Great job. But at least they'll have money again to waste. So it'll be interesting to see what they do now going forward. So at least reinforcements one way or another are coming, eh?
On that note as well, reinforcements through the likes of Casemiro, Lisandro Martinez, and Mason Mount should be returning in the next couple of weeks from what I'm reading here. On top of that, Gio, with some extra money to spend, if you had the ability to sort of control the signings, what sort of areas or what sort of players would you be looking at? You know, theoretically speaking, considering, of course, you are getting back probably your best center back, your big center defensive mid signing as well from last season, and Mason Mount, one of the bigger signings from this season. What do you expect Man U to do in this January transfer window?
Hopefully any and everything. I think you still have to plan for the future, of course. You still have to sign. I think they should be looking for. Uh, they're not going to be able to get a big name. I don't think. They're gonna have to look for loanies that can kind of get them out of the hole. And hopefully, at that option to buy. I think you're looking for somewhat, I want to say struggling stars, but definitely older players that have been looked by other clubs and are looking for more play time. They're kind of on the brink of the wrong side of 30, looking for a new situation. And you're taking a gamble at this point. I don't think you're going to be able to sign bona fide, on form guys right now, as clubs are looking to, secure top four spots, and go into domestic competitions and try to secure trophies there. So those are the type of players you're going to look for. You're going to need reinforcement, especially in the back and the midfield. You just need options to kind of rotate if something doesn't work. Um, yeah, no, that backline that desperately needs help. But don't expect no big names to really come into Old Trafford and kind of flip the script on the head.
I would advise against that as well if I was a Man U fan as well. But Mac, same question to you. How do you expect Man U to sort of move forward in the short term? Because, of course, they are seventh place, 31 points in the Premier League, around 9 points off top four, which is going to be a tough ask, but theoretically they could. What do you expect from Man U moving forward?
For one, we shouldn't have the top four conversation with Manchester United because I don't think it's a benefit, even if they do, because I feel like that will just kind of add fuel to the fire of the poor decisions they've been making. Versus they need to have kind of a reset. They need to kind of hit more of a quote unquote, I would say, rock bottom for them, which in comparison to a lot of other teams, this is still a decent season, right? If you compare and contrast to a lot of other Premier League teams. But I think that they need to reach that bottom to then start building from there. In terms of short term, it's kind of the classic thing where, let's say, like your boat is sinking, right, and there's a hole in the ship, and you plug that one hole and then another appears, then you plug that one hole, another one appears, and it just keeps going and going and going, and you don't know what to do because there's so many holes on the ship right now. It's like kind of like Swiss cheese in a lot of ways, where there are so many problems. All levels of phase you need replacements: midfielders, defenders, attackers, everything. Short term right now, desperately what they need is a backup striker, because whenever Højlund doesn't play, they have to move Rashford centrally because Martial isn't good enough. So I think that is the bang on first thing that they need to be able to address. The problem is, where do you go from there? The question is when the new ownership come in, is the manager the right person to be able to make decisions? Because it should theoretically come from a top-down approach where they're kind of selecting the team. So we don't know long-term who are the keepers on this team, who are the players that we want to be able to potentially build around. I would say the short-term, we're probably looking at, correct me if I'm wrong, Gio, Højlund, Bruno Fernandes, Lisandro Martinez, Garnacho, Rashford, and that's probably it. So you need to fix holes around all of those players. Where do you start? How do you start? I don't know. But in the short term, because you are getting that influx in cash. You don't have the new ownership yet. We don't have any changes in terms of the board yet. So I think having any big changes, any drastic changes, even if it's not necessarily a big name in terms of like a kind of a la Casemiro, Varane, kind of an aging star that used to be good, but really is a poor signing. I don't even think they should bring into a young star that potentially is on their way up, because we don't know if that's going to fit the project that they want to have at the end of the day. So it should be really, if I'm them, I'm saving their pennies. I'm keep building. I'm waiting, because even if Manchester United don't make top four, they're still an attractive club for almost any player in the world to go play for. They are Manchester United. So they're going to have that pull. So I think having that reset, figuring out what they want to do top, bottom, save that. Don't blow your wad now. Just get the backup striker just in case and kind of move forward from there.
Okay, well, my thoughts are I'm actually a little optimistic for the way Man U will finish the season. I think they can definitely try to push for a European spot. Now will be, well, they do face Wigan in the FA Cup, so that likely will be a positive result for them. But with key injuries, players returning, and games sort of slowing down, maybe a little bit less media attention on some Man U turnaround results, that might be positive. I think I'm optimistic. I think the way they finish the season will be a lot stronger than the way they started. And who knows, maybe they will try to make a push for that top four, but I'm confident they can make a European competition at the end of the season. So we'll keep an eye out for that. But this concludes our podcast for today, boys. If you guys like what you heard, please like and subscribe to us on our social medias. That's at House of _Footy. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, get in touch with us via email as well. hustlefooty@hotmail.com is our email. The next time you hear from us will be later this week when we bring you guys our mid-year mulligan as we hit the halfway mark of the season. But until then, thank you, Mac, for joining us.
Happy New Year. Peace out.
Thank you, Gio.
If you guys don't win against Wigan, I swear to God.
See you guys soon.